Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Toejam Earl Panic on Funkotron. In the last one we caught all the Earthlings in stages 7 and 8, and now we're in stage 9, starting off here with the pesky place, I believe is the name of this specific area. And not for nothing, it's apt. This is actually a very crowded screen, all things considered. I want to say out of the roughly 52 Earthlings this specific level has, about 21 of them are before the first screen transition properly. And on that note, I probably should mention, one of the more annoying things about the Cow Ghost enemies I didn't bring up earlier is that they have one of the larger sphere of influences in terms of where they'll roam compared to most other enemy types in the game. In that you can be over a screen away from them and they'll just start beelining their way towards you, and they might interrupt you while you're dealing with another set of enemies you're already very preoccupied with. And well, if they're invisible while they do that, they might just come and attack you out of nowhere, and that can be really jarring. Similarly, and I'm kind of surprised I don't think I've mentioned this yet, something you should note about some enemies is that they can run away from you outright. And if they run off screen, there's a chance they can hide in another object, another tree, on another bush, all that jazz. Just depends on the enemy. In my experience, it tends to happen the most with either the little girl enemy or the tourist enemies, though. Might be just because they're the most flea-happy overall. I don't think I've ever seen a dog do, but at the same time, the dogs are usually kept in very specific, tighter spaces overall. At the very least, the piece of Lamont's favorite stuff that's locked into this level is actively one of the easier ones to find, if only because you complete most of the steps in order to unlock the door for it along the way while we're capturing every Earthling in the stage. Well, we'll learn more about that though once we reach the next sub-area of this specific level. So we continued marching through the relatively large testing staff this game has last time, so let's get back into that. I do want to mention though, while this game has a relatively large testing staff for its era, not for nothing, you can really feel their efforts. The game largely feels very solidly put together, with the only finicky thing here and there being the occasional hitbox issue with the jars colliding with Earthlings. And sometimes Funk teleportation's a little wonky with where it'll put you, but I don't think I've ever had what would be considered a standard glitch happen in all my years of playing this, which, as I've said, it's been pretty much my entire life at this point. Always a weird feeling when you don't jump into a hyper-funk zone, by the way, when the door opens up, because the way the music just cuts off with the sound effect can be really jarring. Next up in the more testers credit set is Mark Lindstrom. He started as a tester on Spider-Man for the Genesis before doing work in some familiar titles to the rest of the testing staff we've talked about thus far. Echo the Dolphin, Night Trap, Sonic 3, etc. Come the mid-90s, he was the testing manager for the 32X release of Virtua Fighter as well as Panzer Dragoon 2. He's also credited in the special thanks sections for Sonic 3D Blast, Duke Nukem 3D on the Saturn, as well as the first Virtual On title. After him is Bill Person. His first role was as a tester on Evander Holyfield's Real Deal Boxing for the Game Gear, before doing similar work on Batman Returns for the Sega CD and several other titles we've mentioned several times up to now. Come the mid-90s, he was instead an assistant or senior producer on several titles, such as the 32X release of Virtua Fighter, Knuckles Chaotix, Astal, The Legend of Oasis, and Panzer Dragoon 2, before once again becoming a QA tester for Sony Computer Entertainment of America, where he's listed doing such work on the second and third entries for not only Ratchet & Clank, not only Jak and Daxter, but also Sly Cooper, so he was all over those three trilogies. Later in the 2000s, he was doing similar work for Zipper Interactive on their SOCOM game series, but since the early 2010s, he's seemingly been at Wizards of the Coast, with his two most recent video game credits at least being as a producer on the 2014 and 2015 Magic the Gathering PC simulators. Also, I'm mashing up right now to try and find an invisible door in this section, but I for some reason can just never find it even on test playthroughs. I know there's meant to be one there that leads to a Trixie rendezvous point. I'm not sure if I just need to do something else to spawn that door in and I just don't know what it is and maps just generally don't list it, or if I just am completely missing the door every time I try. And that really sucks too, because the Trixie power up here is really good. According to maps, the Trixie power up here is that she just makes you completely immune to damage for the remainder of the level. You can still die, but only by drowning while swimming. Which, hey, I'll take that. That sounds like a good deal. We're now reaching the second half of the level, so welcome to the Catacombs. This area is named such for the hole in the ground right there. It looks tiny, but this is a very deep hole that actively contains a majority of this level's Earthlings. But also, the method to reach the Lamont's favorite thing for this level is entirely located down here. Now, when you reach the bottom here, there is a branch point where you can go left or right. I really recommend you go right first, as there's a door that teleports you over to the far left side anyway. Meanwhile, if you go left first, there is a door there that teleports you elsewhere in the level, but it teleports you to the top right of this entire section of the level, and that means you really have to do a bit of a notable backtrack compared to the rest of the level to get back down here, so I'd really recommend just going to the right first. Plus, we can somewhat kill two birds with one stone here because talking to an NPC at the end of this specific side of the area is what activates the method to unlock the Lamont's favorite thing door in this specific level. Hello again, Flarney. What's up, Toejam? Hey, Flarney. Charlotte told me, I mean me, that you're looking for some stuff to help you get the Funkopotamus back. Yeah, do you know what he likes? Well, I don't know. I guess, yeah. Well? Oh, he has a favorite houseplant named Alexander. It's nearby. Where? If you go back to the bottom of the pit, there's a button that will take you up to the top of the pit. Uh-huh. If you jump down again, you'll land on a bubble, and from there you can go into a wall where there's a secret door. Thanks, Flarney. What's kind of wild is that most of the time you talk to Flarney in the game, he gives you directions that are technically correct but are in the wrong directions, or just straight up wrong in some cases. This is like the one time he's completely accurate. So by going through that door, we've now teleported to the far left of that whole branching path area from the pit. And in here we got several rooms with buttons that teleport you to the room further to the right, and there's several Earthlings hidden amongst these. You can come here from the right using Funk teleportation moves, but frankly, they put you into some precarious instances if you do that between things like the construction worker right there or the placement of the tourists in this next room. I'd really recommend just coming from the left after coming through the door on the far right side of the pit. So talking to Flarney does spawn in the button he mentioned at the bottom of the pit here that takes you up to the top. But to this day, I'm not sure if you actively need to land on the bubble he mentions to make the door spawn in, or if you just need to be in the hidden passageway. Because if you hold left, you can just find your way in here. But I don't know if the door just hasn't spawned in yet because I haven't touched the bubble, or if I'm just not pressing up at the right spot. Because again, doing that in these hidden passageways, frankly, just never really feels that good. Once you find the right spot, though, you'll find Lamont's favorite houseplant, so we're good to move on capturing Earthlings in this level and then move on to the next one. In the meanwhile, next up in the game's testing staff is Chris Sinclair. His first credit was on NFL Sports Talk Football 93 starring Joe Montana for the Genesis as an offensive line member, which sounds like a gimmicky way to say test player or programmer by my guess. After that, he was a tester on titles like Batman Returns for the Sega CD, Home Alone on Game Gear, the Berenstain Bears Camping Adventure on Genesis, the Game Gear Master System releases of Dynamite Headdy, Disney's Bonkers on Genesis, Bug on the Sega Saturn, with his last listed credit being such on Citizen X for the Sega CD. With that, we've now wrapped up 4 of the 6 sets of credits that are just game testers, so it's time for Group 5, yet more testers. This group is made up of Simon Liu, Zach Ross, Joe Kane, Mark Paniagua, and Heather Meigs. Simon Liu's career is entirely made up of testing roles, starting with Wing Commander: The Secret Missions for the Super Nintendo. After that, he worked on Aladdin for the Genesis, Home Alone 2 for the Genesis, Echo the Dolphin for Game Gear, Sonic Spinball, Sonic 3, and Streets of Rage 3, with his final listed role being on Star Trek: The Next Generation Futures Past for the Genesis, alongside a couple of other roles prior to that. Meanwhile, this is Zach Ross's only role, barring the usual Moby Games and other adjacent sites might not list other projects that people worked on if they changed their name through marriage or other methods after a certain point. Joe Kane, on the other hand, started on Shock-On Game Gear as a tester, and frankly, if I've mentioned to title the other testers so far I've worked on, i.e. Spinball, Genesis Era, X-Men or Jurassic Park titles, Streets of Rage 3, etc., he was on them too. He was also an on-set assistant on Mr. Bones, did game design for Disney's Bonkers, and did enemy map and general game design for Gubble and its sequel on the PC and PS1. He was also a designer on Mort the Chicken, a level designer on Disney's Tarzan Return to the Jungle for GBA, and was a producer on the GBA game based on the first Raimi Spider-Man film, as well as the Lilo & Stitch GBA game that was a weird Metal Slug clone I had growing up that I don't think I ever finished, or if I did, I locked in out of nowhere for it because, frankly, that game was hard for young me. Mark Paniagua has a pretty familiar set of titles under his name as well, starting as a tester on The Amazing Spider-Man vs. the Kingpin on Sega CD. After that, he was a tester on Home Alone 2 for the Genesis, tester on the Genesis version of Dynamite Headdy, on Sonic 3, on the Sega CD game based on Kamen Rider Zoe, of all things. Tester on Vector Man 2, on Gun Griffin, on Sonic R. Pretty familiar, really. He did end up decently involved in the Sega Sports titles in the mid to late 90s, though, like being an assistant producer on World Series Baseball for the Saturn and doing additional design for NBA Action 98 for the Saturn and PC, alongside several other titles in that time span. Heather Meigs started as a tester on the Genesis game based on Disney's The Little Mermaid before being a tester on games like Disney's Aladdin, Tailspin, Echo on the Game Gear, making my video Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch for the Sega CD, testing for Shaq Fu on Game Gear? Good lord. She was a QA lead on Obsidian for the PC in 97, which was one of the several games that tried to be like missed in that era. But she was also a tester on Jersey Devil NFL Extreme on the PS1 in Blasto, with her final role being as an analyst on Cool Borders 3 for the PS1. Next up, we're on to the final set of testers, even more testers. This setup is made up of Cheryl Sink, David Woolson, Daniel Ayer, and Serena Rana. With that said, this is the only credit I can find for most of them, with the only exception of that being Serena, who is also a tester on Zoop for the Game Boy, which is a weird little puzzle game. Also, because I don't think I've mentioned it outright, occasionally you might see there's like a weird little dog on the foreground, or a guy that looks a little bit like a knight helmet with a single eye jumping around, or a bird flying by. Those are entirely just set dressing elements there to make the world feel more alive. They do nothing to impact either you or the Earthlings you're up against. Though there are times where if you're real trigger happy, you're probably going to throw a jar at one of them on accident, but it doesn't do anything because it'll just fly past them completely. Now we're into level 10 though, right at Squiggly's pad. Oh, hello TJ, LaWanda was just talking about you. She was? Yeah, what was it she said? Oh yeah, she said Toejam is so cute I could just... She could just what? Oh, I forget. Wow. Bummer. See you later. I can't even say thanks for anything because you did start to tell me something but then completely forgot it, so it's almost like you actively took information away from me. So I guess thanks for negative? In any case, level 10 here is a much more straightforward level than the previous one, with there being a whopping 30 fewer Earthlings for us to capture here, putting it at about 22 in total. The third major screen is definitely a bit of a weird one in comparison to some other stages, but it's trying to do something very specific, so I can't complain too much. All right. The piece of Lamont's favorite stuff to find here can definitely be a little bit iffy though, because it's overall an easy one to grab, but it's just out of the way enough where it's easy to miss. In the meanwhile, continuing on with the credits, next up is the people who worked on the game's manual. One of them was Greg Johnson, who we covered already since he was one of the leads on the game, but also in that category is Carol Ann Hanshaw. She worked in manuals and writing copy her entire credited career, starting with the former on Super Solver's Treasure Mountain for DOS. She then did manual work on many games across the 90s, including Sonic 2, Echo the Dolphin, Surf Ninjas on Game Gear, Home Alone 2, Jurassic Park, and Aladdin for Genesis, Sonic Spinball, Sonic Chaos, Shining Force, The Sword of Hyja for Game Gear, the 32X version of Doom, Samurai Showdown for the 3DO, Jumping Flash and Pandemonium 1 and 2 for the PS1, Quest 64, the first two Spyro games, Ape Escape 1, Tomb Raider 4, and Blood Omen 2, among many others. Frankly, rather prolific, all things considered. After them is the important names section, which I'm assuming is some sort of super special thanks based on what other projects these people have worked on. Included in this category are Robert Leyland, Paul Race III, Fred Ford, and Gregory D. Hammond. All right. Robert Leyland started as a designer and programmer for Dragon's Eye on the Apple II and Atari 8-bit, but also did sound effects and additional programming for the first Toejam Earl, programmed Star Control for Genesis and DOS, programmed the Phantom Menace game on PS1, programmed The Simpsons Wrestling, as well as Tony Hawk's Downhill Jam on PS2. Most recently, he was involved in the whole Skylanders era for Spyro the Dragon, either programming or doing hardware design depending on the game for either the original game, Spyro's Adventure, Imaginators, Giants, and Trap Team from 2011 till 2016. Which, not for nothing, I didn't really care too much for the whole toy play connectivity angle that they did for a lot of games in that era between Skylanders and Disney Infinity. The only ones I really ever bought outright was Amiibo, and that's because those are characters I generally cared a lot more for. But not for nothing, some of the Disney Infinity figures did look kind of cool. Though I think my favorite version of that whole toy video game connectivity deal was probably the Lego Dimensions deal. If only because for the price of the toy parts that connected to the video game, you got a decently functioning, smaller scale Lego set. And to my knowledge, the sections they unlocked in LEGO Dimensions were generally decently scaled. Like, I know the Sonic world was pretty large, all things considered. Meanwhile, as much as I loved Amiibo, them, Skylanders, and Disney Infinity figures were very much just, here's a cool little statue of a character you might like, and they do things in the games they're connected to, but it's much smaller scale. I still sometimes collect Amiibo specifically, but it's largely dependent on whether or not it's specifically a Metroid Amiibo, largely. I'm only missing one of them at this point, and it's the Samus Returns Samus one, because I did manage to get a copy of the Samus Returns Metroid one all these years later. And honestly, now that I especially do more with painting on the side with model kits and the like, there's a part of me that does want to kind of track down some of the Disney Infinity figures or dupes of certain amiibos I have and actively try to do custom paint job stuff on them. But that's going to be a slow process of learning what I want to do and how to do it to begin with on top of other stuff. In the meanwhile, it's time for Bluna again. What's up, Toejam? Hi, Bluna. Got another secret for you. Sup? Well, another one of Lamont's favorite things is near here. Where? Below here is an underwater maze. If you go in there, then keep going right, not up, you'll find a secret cave. What's there? You'll see. Okay, thanks. You know, Toejam, given what the subject of that conversation is, I think you can make a pretty good guess on what was up there, but I guess you had to just ask anyway. Now, the underwater maze is one you can access from two distinct points, but they are distinctly next to each other. Namely, directly below us in level design is a big lake you can enter the maze through no matter what. But if you actively go along the platforms along the top of that water towards the east, just before the screen transition, there's another chunk of water that's much thinner. If you go in there, you end up at the opposite end of the water maze in specific, but more often than not, you're entering from this specific side. So in general, you want to just keep towards the right in this maze to find the location Bluna was foreshadowing. If you actively head further upwards more often than not, that'll get you towards the other entrance we're going to need to use as an exit from here. This definitely is the most in-depth underwater section up to this point, but they don't usually get that much larger than this, barring one exception, and the final main level of the game will show off at the very end of the LP. Welcome to the Way Cool Cave. Hey, Toejam! What's up, little guy? I'll just tell you, I'm Chester. Thanks, Chester. I'm looking for... Just kidding, I'm really Lester. Fine, whatever. I'm looking for a secret door. Do you know any around here? Well, no. Unless you mean the one on the other side of this pool that has Lamont's eyeball collection in it. Is that the one you mean? That's what I mean. Thanks, Lester. Actually, I'm really... Look, I don't care what your name is, alright? Oh, okay. See ya. There's a very real, I don't want to deal with this shit energy there that I just have to wonder what kid annoyed what developer on this game just enough to make them vent it through this. That's Lamont's favorite thing down, so now we're just good to actively head off towards the end of level 10. While we speed our way through the underwater maze to continue the level, let's talk about Gregory D. Hammond from the Important People's list. He started doing graphics for Willy Byte in the Digital Dimension on the Apple II and later did some playtesting on some of the early Star Control releases, but is easily most famous for being a producer on the very early releases of the original Secret of Monkey Island. He also did some 3D work on battle stations for the PS1, additional mission building for Star Wars X-Wing as well as its follow-up X-Wing vs. TIE Fighter, and also did work for Build-A-Bear Workshop. Welcome to Hugsville on the DS. Hey DJ, what's up, Luanda? It's good to see you. You're so cute when you get nervous. Thanks. This place is a little confusing. Don't worry if you get a little lost. I'll be right here if you get lonely. Gee, wow. Bye. So the final screen of this level is an active labyrinth where pretty much every single friendly NPC we've met along the way can be found in some locations. I don't showcase where they all are though, just because that would take too long. Hey TJ! Hey Peebo! Hey, just up and to the right of here, drop a coin in the meter if you're low on funk. Okay. If you see Bluna, don't tell her where I am, okay? Don't worry, I don't even know where I am. Bye. Off the top of my head, I think Bluna is actively the only friend we don't talk to here because she's a little more out of the way compared to the others. The others I can largely talk to along the way to the exit of the area. But if you actively do insert a coin into the parking meter, like Peebo said, you actively find yourself at a dance-off to get some extra funk, in the case you actually want to try and get some more of that. With that said, thanks to my Hyperfunk Zone visits, as well as how much I just get across the game otherwise, I'm still maxed out, so I have more than enough. And not for nothing, getting a little ahead of ourselves here, the game does reward you for keeping high supplies of pretty much any given collectible you can find. What's up, Toejam? Hey, Charla. What's wrong, Charla? I'm lost. How do I get out of here? I think you go down, up? That's okay, I'll find my way out. Good luck. See ya. Specifically, at the very end of the game, no matter what ending you get, the leftover amounts of coins, funk, panic buttons, and funk vacuums you have actually do get tallied into your score. Hey TJ! Hey Otis! Did I ever tell you youngsters the story about the magic button? No?
Well, as I recall, there was a young alien who came across a button, and each time he pressed it, that button did something different than the last.
Gee, Otis, that's interesting, but I really don't have the time to...
Yep, it was quite a story, and a long one, too. I think his name was Quincy, or was it Armando? Well, never mind. You see, this young alien...
Oh, gosh, would you look at the time? I gotta go. Sorry, Otis.
Okay, TJ, good luck with them Earthlings.
You might think Otis bringing it up might mean that that button is the button that will do multiple things, but no! That activate, I think, is the one that teleports you over towards where Balloona is in that maze that I just did not care to show off. And I think after Balloona, there's a button that would take me over back towards Charla off the top of my head? Something along those lines. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 7, we're dashing on into level 11, and I think at least level 12, catching more Earthlings as we go, as per usual. See you guys then.